I'm Randy Reid, editor of the EdisonReport, and this is our 4th annual discussion of current lighting topics. It's being hosted by the National Lighting Bureau Board of Directors, and we're here at the IBEW International Office, and we appreciate them hosting this event and allowing us to use their equipment. I'm here with Mark Lien, Jim Yorgey, and Marty Riesberg. And the subject matter of this panel discussion is cybersecurity. Now, Mark, you brought some slides of a keynote that you gave not too long ago to the NCQLP. Why don't you share some of those slides with us?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, and I think it really sets up the conversation, Randy. So the first slide speaks to something that a Forbes reporter did. She was able to Google a very simple search phrase for smart homes and find a number of home automation systems belonging to a very popular company. She then found where they were located online and contacted one of the users in their home and told them that she thought she could control their lighting, door locks, all of the other components that they had integrated onto this system. They gave her the authorization to do that, and indeed, from thousands of miles away, she began controlling the devices in their home. Well, that certainly speaks to a cybersecurity concern, right?
Sure.
And lighting is an aspect of that. The next slide that I have is with the Nest thermostat, and many of us are familiar with Nest, and of course it can include lighting as part of what it operates in addition to the thermostats and smoke alarms and the other aspects in the home. Somebody hacked into one of these Nest thermostats, and the illustration on the slide I think is humorous, but you may not be able to read it. It says, on the Nest device it says, "I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that is something I cannot allow to happen." So we see obviously implications there for not just the lighting but other components of the home being controlled remotely for someone who may have ill intent. Sure. The next slide refers to another system that lighting is a part of, and it actually, in fact, I guess we can move on to the slide right after that once you've seen the product. It had a number of security flaws. The Homeland Security Group issued a warning to 500,000 purchasers of this product, saying that there were 5 high vulnerability, that's their highest rating, high vulnerability concerns for hacking with this particular device. Now, I want to note that these companies have corrected these situations. This is new technology. Problems are going to happen. This isn't an indictment of any of these products. They're unique. They were brought into the marketplace. They're creative products, good innovation, but there are concerns. And one of the concerns that I have is that this is lighting oriented and it could affect our industry. So the next one that we see really, I think, illustrates one of my primary concerns, and that says fridge hacked, car hacked, next up light bulbs. And it refers to this particular lamp, which is a Wi-Fi lamp. There's a number of Wi-Fi products on the marketplace, but with this one, you could get outside of a user's home and Google their system, and it would ping your router password. Now, once someone has your router password, then they can access through your router anything on your network. It bypasses the firewall on your computer. So what happens here is people won't be trying to get into systems through the hardest access point, the encryption on a computer, for example. They're going to try and get in through the easiest, the weakest link. We don't want lighting to be the weakest link. So we're early in this technology. We need to prepare so that we are not the weakest link. If it's a refrigerator or the coffee pot, that's not our issue. All right. Okay. Next up, we see that Zigbee has been hacked, one of the control protocols. I didn't include all of the slides in this deck, but Bluetooth, and if we go to the next slide, we see Z-Wave, another very effective protocol for interconnection of devices. And this one had implications because the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas put 65,000 Z-Wave controls on 2,800 guest rooms. And in doing that, people could control locks if they were to break into those systems. Now, I'm sure the security people at Wynn Hotel have taken precautions for this, but in fact the problems are occurring frequently. And then we also see one that, and there's a YouTube video for this, if anybody wants to go on YouTube and look for converse snitch, as in conversation and snitch, converse snitch. But two people designed a light bulb, cost them $100, and then in the YouTube video you see them walk into a McDonald's and a Starbucks and an office building and screw this light bulb in. In the office they put it in a desk lamp. The light bulb picks up the conversation, the private conversation that's going on in any of these spaces, and it turns it into text very effectively, like the Apple Watch and a lot of other devices do, but then it tweets it instantly, so it's a live tweet.
Wow.
It's $100. So I think the potential for ill intent there, I don't even know what else you'd use it for, but maybe a prank perhaps, but the potential for ill intent is certainly there, and for people capturing and invading our privacy. And then we see how people learn about this. There's hacking tools, and in this next slide we see a Wi-Fi hacking site where you can learn how to do this. So this isn't something that's especially difficult. There's a Black Hat convention in Las Vegas on a regular basis where people meet to do this. And this hacking video comes with reviews, if you want to trust the reviews.
So you can rate your hacker.
You can, yeah, you can rate this device, and of course it gets a 9.94 review. So we also see on the next slide a little bit of a comparison here, and it's just something that resonates with me is there were two very popular science fiction books that talked about the future in a time pretty much where we are now. In 1984, when George Orwell wrote it, said that we would be dictated to, and people would put restrictions on us, and we would have our privacy invaded by a authoritarian government. But Huxley looked at it differently in Brave New World. He said, you know, there's parts of this that we're going to want, and we'll bring it on ourselves. And then the negative aspects occur. Anything strong enough to help us, strong enough to hurt us. And Huxley said, this is something we're going to bring on ourselves. And at this point, we are encouraging this technology at a very rapid pace.
Let's talk a little bit about commercial and industrial applications. And how do we pre-qualify an installer or a contractor to install these sorts of systems?
Yeah, the systems of this type need to evolve in terms of going from just electrical installation to something that includes the IT side of things. It's something we see the electrical contractors picking up where they'll have a new skill set that's required. They'll get the education to be able to install network infrastructure. We're involved in a project 30-story building where security of the network is fundamental. And what the electrical contractor is doing is providing not only electrical installation, but they're doing the network infrastructure as well. Systems like ours are actually on their own network that the electrical contractor is responsible for putting in, so that our network isn't part of the overall building network, to make sure they're secure. That's how you keep, one way of securing systems is not allowing them to be tied together.
Right.
We see this in a lot of projects, whether it's government or military and your banking industry, for instance. They all, are very concerned about security, and so things like, introducing wireless. There's a lot of wireless things that certainly Mark indicated, and what some facilities don't allow wireless to avoid being hacked, right, with those things. The other thing is using proprietary protocols that aren't easily hacked and providing layers of security. In other words, if we take the credit card example, the Europeans are a little bit ahead of us. We're starting to catch up, and in Europe, when you're using your credit card, you have both a chip and you have a PIN, and they implemented that. Well, we don't want to inconvenience our consumers, so we've started using the chip in our credit cards, but we haven't gone the next step of adding that second layer of security. And that's really where we need to go, is learn what we need to do to avoid the hacking and implement those things.
So speaking of hacking in this credit card, the way I understand it, the reason we do have the chips now is a direct result of a big box retailer that was hacked maybe 2 years ago around Christmas. What have you learned about that?
There were a number of credit card hacks, and the one most interesting, most relevant to this conversation is the fact that this big box retailer that we're speaking of actually had their POS system, their point of sale system, hacked coming through the building automation system. So as Jim said, the idea of segmenting the network and keeping things apart is one level of security that actually wasn't implemented in this case. And what happened is there was a gateway that allowed for the big box retailer to have all of the, both lighting and HVAC systems, other things, remotely controlled across all of the stores, so that just moments before they open the doors, the system come on. They don't have the HVAC running, they don't have most of the lights running when the store is not open. So that system was actually tied also to the network that's running the point of sale. Once they were around the building automation system into the lighting and HVAC, the hackers actually realized, boy, I can get over into the point of sale, and that's where the credit card numbers were compromised for millions of people and put a bunch of us at risk. It's a major big box retailer when this happened.
It's interesting.
Well, there's some similarities here with lighting too, and one that Jim touched on, and that's the necessity for layers of security. The chip helps in that regard, and of course those retailers were motivated by cost because of the financial liabilities involved with a hacking situation like that. But in lighting, many of those wireless protocols that I just mentioned, they offer multiple layers to manufacturers that can design them into their applications and their products. The problem becomes user acceptance and convenience. If the user finds that they have to come up with another password or PIN number in order to get into every device, for example, it becomes cumbersome. And if a competitor figures out how to design without that, they have an advantage. So in many cases, those extra layers are not being implemented.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we've done in products that are focused on the user, of actually requiring a physical switch to be pushed as part of the authentication process, so that there's no way a system can get in without, or be authenticated without that physical button being pushed. So it really helps secure the systems, and it's doing those kinds of things. Yes, it's maybe a little bit of inconvenience, but it's a one-time thing that has to be done.
And I would agree, pushing a button is easy. As a consumer, and I have several of these in my home, some were easy to install, others were not. Pushing a button is easy, and I don't mind doing that.
And I think as these systems evolve and we put these more things in them, it becomes all the more important to pre-qualify the people that are installing these systems, as Jim said earlier, because there are additional layers. There's actually even additional players at the table. You wouldn't think necessarily when you're putting in a lighting system to invite the IT department to the discussion. These are the sorts of things that will continue to change as the technology evolves.
Yeah, many of the meetings I'm involved in on projects today are IT discussions, talking about what ports need to be secured on network switches and routers and things like that. That we 5 years ago we didn't have those conversations, and it's including the electrical contractors, it's including the audiovisual people, it's including the window treatment people, and of course lighting, and HVAC. Because the HVAC system, the lighting system, want to communicate to each other, but you have to do that in a secure fashion.
So let me ask you this, if I may. A lighting designer that's designing one of these systems, do they have to get involved in that level of detail?
I feel the lighting designers do need to be educated on this. They don't need to have the IT network language necessarily, but they need to understand that it's an important part of the process, and it has to be part of the commissioning effort. The IT infrastructure has to be in place before the HVAC and the lighting systems can be properly commissioned. So the lighting designer needs to understand that's in the job process.
Okay, Mark?
Jim, this speaks to a broader issue, and it's the evolution of our industry, particularly the accelerated pace that we've seen with solid-state lighting. as any industry evolves, and ours has been evolving, for over a century now, as any industry evolves, it by necessity grows more complex. We certainly see that in some of the other topics we're going to discuss today, Randy. So with that complexity comes specialization. And we see it in medicine with doctors. We see it in computers with people specializing in specific software and hardware. And we're seeing it in our industry now too. So to qualify, as Marty was talking about, an installer up front, there may be, and there will be, some specialized skill sets that'll have to be brought in that we've never had to deal with before.
I think these skill sets that we're talking about as well are not just segmented. In the past, as these systems were not as complex, we were very segmented. There was the lighting guy and there was the HVAC guy, and did they ever interact? Now, as Jim is saying, there's one occupancy sensor that's talking to both systems. It makes sense. There should not be two occupancy sensors in that. But now when you're doing that, these systems are beginning to have broader effects, and we have to take more of a whole building look than just a lighting system look or an HVAC access control.
Marty, that's part of the convergence.
There you go.
And what's happening now is lighting was a standalone product. It was a standalone box in the ceiling, if you will, with its own switch and wiring. And now it's converging into being a component of the electrical infrastructure of the building and being put into a lot of other devices, which necessitates an engagement with trades that we haven't had to deal with before because we were isolated, as you mentioned.
Please.
Yeah, and it's complicated, obviously, the building process, and that's where we have to recognize that, and the need to provide the right commissioning element to the building that includes all the different trades. And we need to optimize the systems as well, not just to squeeze the most energy out of a lighting system, but to make sure it's going to function properly, long term. And that means walking in and pushing every button and testing every switch and turning on every occupant sensor. And the occupant sensor, like you're saying, is not just for lighting anymore. It's for HVAC, it's for the audiovisual system. It might be involving the security as well. So there's all this intercommunication that needs to go on in a secure fashion.
Okay. That's a very interesting point that you mentioned about not just being concerned with efficiency, because many of these new products, as we add features to lighting, are going to take extra energy consumption. If we have a motion sensor that's on all the time, it increases the standby power. If we try to integrate with videos in some of our lighting fixtures, which exists now, it's going to take additional standby power for perhaps the photocell that's built into that. The Wi-Fi capability takes additional standby power. So we're trading off, in some cases, these features for a level of efficiency.
Okay, gentlemen, I want to just kind of to do a hypothetical, and it's a bit bizarre, so bear with me. We're in Washington, D.C., and not too long ago the Pope visited Washington, D.C. Let's say a terrorist gets involved. The city of Washington buys 100 Cobra head fixtures. They're LED, they're wireless, and they're controllable. And the bad guy puts a little plastic explosives into some of these Cobra heads. And he hacks into the system. The Pope Mobile drives by, and a button is pushed, and a Cobra head blows up. Could that happen?
Well, bizarre scenario? Yes, thank you, Randy. It is. But oddly, it doesn't seem all that bizarre. It seems as if something that someone potentially could do, but not just with lighting, with other products as well.
I think it is something like that. I think you should write a script for a movie. That would be a good one. But there are organizations being formed and associations, and part of their effort is to make sure systems are secure. There is a alliance for exterior lighting, for street lighting, that is looking at how systems interconnect, because there's different manufacturers' systems and they have to talk to each other, but they have to be secure. And it is top in their minds. You know, it's something we think about all the time with all our products, of making sure that they are from the embedded microcontroller level up, making sure the right security things are in there. There's the Connected Lighting Alliance, which for the wireless lighting products, they are providing the approval of the protocols and looking at security issues, so that the light bulbs that we'll be buying, that we can talk to, are secure.
Yeah, and Jim, I'm looking at it with a different perspective. I think no lighting manufacturer would intentionally design a product like that, absolutely. But someone could circumvent the product and put an isolated type of explosive device in that was activated by a cell phone, for example, and we've seen that happen, again, not just with lighting, but with other products as well. I don't, that's terrorism. I don't know exactly how we stop that, and if anybody has that solution, I don't think they've come forward yet.
Certainly towards that end, I think it's important that people recognize and understand the quality and the products that they're getting from a name brand product, both with the products, when you're talking manufacturers, or the installers. That these systems are probably not areas that make the most sense to cut corners in ways that you wouldn't have really thought of before. So
that's an excellent point, because the installer is a checkpoint.
Absolutely.
As is a quality product. So the installer would be someone who could notice if anything had been modified. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this concludes our segment today, but it looks like cybersecurity is now front and center in the lighting business, and something we all need to be thinking about. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Randy.
All right.